So the big idea here is that while the simple interpretation is that second day of Passover, you start counting 50 days, 49 days, 7 weeks, then the 50th day is Shavuot, is the holiday. Why do we count? The Torah doesn't say explicitly. Commentators say, the early commentators, the Rishonim, say that this is to commemorate the enthusiasm through which the Jewish people anticipated, and the enthusiasm, anticipation, the Jewish people anticipated and anticipated the giving of the Torah. So when they left it, God said, Moshe told them that when you leave Egypt, you're going to serve God on this mountain at Mount Sinai. They knew that from the outset. So when they leave Egypt, they're counting because they're anticipating the great revelation of the giving of the Torah. So that's the simple interpretation. Then you have within the other commentators as well that start thinking about, it's not just counting and anticipation, it's also purification. And one of the places where you see that is you see that there are 7 weeks. And in the Torah, the book of Leviticus, and elsewhere, the book of Leviticus, last Tazria Metzera, you read that often the process of purification requires 7 days. Like waiting 7 days. Also, when you come in contact with a dead person, there's a 7-day period. And other forms of impurity, there are a 7-day period. So all of a sudden now we're 7 weeks. So we say, oh, so the idea of counting 7 weeks, counting 7 is not just idea that they were anticipating or commemorating the anticipation, but it's also preparation to get from the spiritual state of Egypt, which the sages say that in Egypt, the Jewish people were on a very low spiritual level. They were in the 49 gates of impurity. So to get from there to the state where God would give us the Torah, we would be ready. And for the giving of the Torah, we would need to prepare spiritually. And the 7 days, the 7 weeks correspond to the 7 days of purity that we find in the Torah in multiple places. So that's step 2. Then you get to step 3, the Kabbalists. The Kabbalists say that the 7 weeks represent the 7 emotional traits. And there's 7 sfirot. And every week we count, meaning we refine one of those 7 sfirot. And then you have 49 days, because the principle in the Kabbalah is that in holiness, there's interconnectedness. One of the big differences between holiness, in the world of order, we spoke about the world of order, the world of chaos. The world of chaos is the source of the unholiness. In the world of chaos, each sphera is independent and standalone, and that can create problems down the line. In the world of holiness, the world of tikkun, the world of correction, there is integration. So each sphera includes all 7. So within kindness, there's kindness and there's discipline and there's beauty, there's victory and there's splendor and there's connection and there's speech, etc. So that's why you have 7 days. And therefore you get to the idea that in the Sephardic Siddurim and the Hasidic Siddurim prayer books, every day, it's going to tell you which sphera you're supposed to refine, you're supposed to think about. And today they have modern publications that give practical examples of the various integration of the Sfirot. There's a book by Rabbi Simon Jacobson that I think Vicky has. I believe it's also on Chabad.org, that every day would give you a meditation for that day's Sfira. So that's introduction. Now we can talk about, now we can go to the verses, which is going to be in the portion of Emor, which is in 2 weeks from now. And we can read what Rabbi Shneur Zalman talks about the discourse in detail. Here he doesn't get into the notion of the exact 7 sfirot that is done in other discourses, but here is generally the period of, so contrasts the period of Passover, Shavuot, counting of the Omer and Shavuot, how it's one long continuum, but each one is sort of a different direction, and altogether, all 3 periods and states of being are necessary. So that's an introduction. Comments, questions, of course, always welcome. I'll share the screen and we'll read a little bit from the Holy Words.
Rabbi, just a brief question about, in many of your discussions, you imply that some holidays are kind of more important than others. I mean, Pesach always is preceded by Adar, so that we can fine tune it to the spring. And then we know that Elul precedes Rosh Hashanah, and there's the blasting of the shofar in anticipation. And now you're saying the only place where counting is memorialized in such a deep way is for Shavuot. So explain and contrast these three. What it would almost seem now Shavuot, which is Matan Torah, which makes sense, is the leader of the pack. But
Right.
but maybe you can dwell on that just for a moment.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because internalization, the idea here is as follows. The idea is that to internalize something, it takes one-time events don't change people. We think it changes people, but it doesn't really. Sometimes it does, but usually if it changes people, it's just a catalyst to change. But change is a process that takes time, and it's a series of small steps. What's interesting between the difference between, let's say, the high holidays and Shavuot or Passover is when the process of internalization or preparation takes place. And when you talk about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the preparation precedes the month of Tishrei, right? So you have Elul, it's 30 days before, it's 40 days before Yom Kippur, right? Because Yom Kippur is the 10th days of Tishrei. So you have a month and 10 days, and that corresponds to the 40 days that Moses was on the mountain for the third time, and Moses achieved forgiveness. So here too, we have 40 days of leading up to the forgiveness. But here, the preparation is before Yom Kippur and before Rosh Hashanah. When it comes to Passover, we'll get to Shavuot in a second, but the Pesach is the great revelation. The Jewish people are not worthy. The Jewish people are enslaved, not only physically, but also spiritually. And then you have the great revelation. We read it on Pesach, that Hashem himself reveals himself to the people at midnight, etc. So it's not just a technical, geographical a redemption, but it's also a spiritual redemption where we're pulled away from the energies of the unholiness and we're introduced to the realm of holiness. But now the process of internalization happens not before Passover. Historically, right? Historically, they didn't do anything to earn the Exodus. It was basically as a result of Hashem's promise to the patriarchs. And what happens here now is after the revelation is the process of internalization. And only when it's internalized, then you can get the Torah. So there are different times. Sometimes you prepare for an event, and sometimes the process of growth happens as a result. And that depends on where the Jewish people were at the time. And that depends on who takes the initiative. We talked about this in the past, where on Rosh Hashanah, God waits for the person to take an initiative. So we start with the work. We start elevating ourselves. It's grassroots, it's bottom up. Whereas Pesach was the revelation from above. And revelation from above, it means we didn't really do much. Hashem comes to us. We spoke about this when we spoke about the Song of Songs, the beautiful verses that you have on the covers of some of the Haggadahs, some of the picture Haggadahs, many of them actually, even the very ancient ones, even handwritten ones, you have the image of the deer or the gazelle. The sound of the gazelle leaping over the mountains. That's a sign of the gazelle, meaning Hashem running toward the people. Hashem is coming to us. So Hashem comes us and pulls us out. Now we have to internalize. Now we have to change. Now we have to grow. That's the counting of the Omer, which does not precede, but it follows the great revelation. Once you have both those themes together, then you get to Yom Kippur is the marriage. But then you get to Shavuot, which is the marriage. The Mishnah says, Yom Chatunato Zom Matan Torah. The day of the engagement is the giving of the Torah, right? Betrothal is the giving of the Torah. So I think the giving of the Torah, Shavuot, which you say in some ways is the most important holiday. Everything is important, right? What's more important, the wedding date or the day you met your spouse? Well, they're both important. Without the first meeting, nothing would have happened. But on the other hand, the wedding is, of course, the time of formalizing and institutionalizing establishing a much deeper step, right? So they're both important, of course, but each one's important in a different way. But what I would say is by the time you get to the giving of a Torah, both the bride and the groom have to show up. In other words, you have to have both approaches. You have to have a revelation from above plus the response from below. And only then when you have them both together do you get to the giving of the Torah. It's no mistake that Pesach is month 1. Iyar, which is the month that follows Nisan, the month that follows Nisan, the month that follows Passover is month 2. That's a unique month because every day of that month you count the Omer. It's the only month in the year where every single day of the month has a specific and unique mitzvah. So tied to that day. So generally speaking, we count the Omer the second month. I mean, we do the end of the first month and the beginning of the third month, but the full month is the second. So that's 1, 2, and the giving of a Torah is in Sivan is in the third month. And according to the Kabbalah, 1 is revelation from above, like day 1 of creation. Day 2, there's already dichotomy. There's the person preparing himself. And day 3 is the union of 1 and 2.
And why is there no formal counting in the 40 days of Elul?
So that's a good question. So that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question, why we don't count, even though we do prepare. That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe it will be related to what the discourse explains, because the discourse is going to start with the verse Usefartem Lachem, count for yourself, and it's going to analyze different interpretations of the word Usefartem, and maybe some of those are only possible after Passover. So we'll see. The short answer is I don't know. But again, what we're getting at is from the mystical perspective, counting is preparation, but it's a form of preparation that encompasses different levels, all related to the word counting. But in Hebrew, the word counting is a much more interesting word because, for example, I'll give you this spoiler alert right now because we're starting in a minute or two. Sfartem is sapphire, sapphire, is the same word as counting, which is to radiate. Sipur, telling a story, is also part of the word of counting. Sphira, the 10 divine attributes, are also related. So it's not just any type of preparation, but it's a specific type of preparation that's multi-layered. And maybe when we finish the discourse, we'll be able to say how come the counting is specifically before Passover, after Passover, not before Rosh Hashanah. Right now, I don't know. So that's the right answer because I can't prove me wrong. I say, I don't know. What are you going to do? Okay. But thank you for that.
Rabbi, what is today? Is today Tiferet of Gevura?
Yeah, today was Tiferet. That was the 10th day. Yeah, today's 10th of the Omer. Yeah.
And maybe like in answer to Bob's question, maybe because it's more like for the personal development, maybe that's why we need some structure. Not,
Right.
unlike the preparation.
Very interesting, very interesting. So you're saying that when you come to Rosh Hashanah, it's almost in a way, it's actually more general. Generally speaking, what you're trying to do is orient toward Hashem. Right? Even though there is an element of cheshbon hanefesh, which would be taking an accounting of what you did in the past, but in general, teshuva is more of a general attitude, which is the orientation. Where am I headed? Where do I want to go? Where is my will? Where is my desire? And will and desire, it's more general. It's all encompassing. In the Kabbalah, it's called sovev. It encompasses the person because it's all encompassing. If I want something, every part of me is going to go in that direction. If I want something else, every part of me will go in the other direction. So it's possible, what Vicky is saying is that when you talk about teshuva, the general orientation is more important. When you talk about refinement of self, then you have to get into the specifics of the personality to examine and refine each one. Okay, that could be it. That's good. Toda rabba. Thank you very much, Vicky. Thank you. Okay, so we'll share the screen. We'll read a little bit. We'll see how this goes. Go back to the good old days when we read inside with the English. Yeah, I think I'm sharing.
Yes, you're sharing.
Okay, beautiful. So this is what they call Usefartem Lachem, which is the name of the discourse. The discourse is named after the first verse of the discourse, which is the first verse, which is the verse in the Torah. Again, it's going to be an Emor. So by the time we get to 2 weeks from now, we'll be already deep into the discourse, and it's the mitzvah of counting the Omer. This is from Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad. They have a book in English called Selections from Torah or on Likkutei Torah Festivals. I could be Vicky bought this book once upon a time. I don't remember. I don't know. But I think he once asked me about it. But in any case, what it seems that the way it's laid out here on Chabad.org, on the English book, you have the Hebrew and the English. In the book, in the hardcover, you have the Hebrew and the English. Here it seems that the lines that are indented are the commentary. And the lines that are the regular lines are the words of Rabbi Shneur Zalman. So we'll see how much of the indented lines we want to read. We'll read a little bit. We'll see how we go. Please do not hesitate to, I'm not going to say interrupt because it's not an interruption. Please don't hesitate to stop, and we could elaborate and discuss and analyze and question and see what happens. So here we go. Usefartem, and you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Shabbat, from the day when you bring the Omer that is waved, 7 weeks. That's Vayikra 23, Leviticus 23. Now there's a whole story. We talked about this once, about that dispute between the Sadducees and the rabbis about, he says the day after the Shabbat, without getting into that whole discussion, the traditional way of understanding it, it's the day after Pesach. First day of Pesach is also called Shabbat because Shabbat simply means to rest. And on the first day of Passover, we also rest from work. Okay, but without getting into that, the day after Pesach, second day of Pesach. Remember, now, outside of Israel, the second day of Pesach is also a holiday. But the first day, but in Israel, it's only the first day is the holiday. The second day of Pesach is not holiday anymore, Chol HaMoed, and then they would actually harvest the first grain. They would harvest the first grain of barley, the wheat. They would bring the first wheat to the temple on Shavuot. But the first grain of barley was brought on the second day of Pesach. They brought a measurement called the Omer. And from the day you wave the Omer, you count 7 weeks. Okay. As the Mimer proceeds to explain, both the actions mentioned in the verse, meaning to say the counting, the weaving, the 7 weeks, all this, both the actions mentioned in the verse, the counting and the waving, have parallels in our divine service. Okay, so now we start with what I mentioned before. The root of the term Usefartem, translated as "and you shall count," also has the meaning of luminance, as in the phrase Even Sapir, a luminous sapphire stone. So this is interesting. When you talk about counting in the Hebrew, counting is also illuminating. What's the connection between counting and sapphire and illuminating? So in a way, before things are counted, they're just in confusion. They're sort of in the dark. But once you start counting and you start analyzing every detail, then you're sort of shedding light on what's happening here. So that's why in biblical Hebrew, the word for counting is the same as sapir, sapphire, but sapir means luminous. Similarly, the 10 Sfirot are given the name Sephira because they shine forth divine light, right? The Kabbalists use the term Sphira for the divine attributes. But why the term Sphira? What does Sphira mean? There's all kinds of interpretations. Nobody knows for sure. I'm saying no one knows for sure. There are multiple interpretations because the Sphirot are multi-layer. And for the Sphirot, for example, yes, you count them. The earliest place where it says Sphirot, I believe, is the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. And if I'm not mistaken, over there, Sphirot just means counting. There are 10 fingers, you have 10 numbers, you count to 10. So there's 10 Sphirot. That's where it appears for the first time. But later Kabbalists explain, no, the divine attributes are called Sphira. Why are they called Sphira? First of all, they're numbered. Numbered is also limited. These are limited expressions of God's infinite light. In other words, you have God's infinite light, but then this is a limited expression. But also, another interpretation why they're called Sfirot, says Rabbi Shneur Zalman, they're called Sfira because Sfira means to illuminate. And what do the 10 Sfirot do? The 10 Sfirot illuminate for us, right? It's interesting. Infinite light often cannot be seen by the people. It's too great to be conceived, right? It's like the light that the human eye cannot see. So in some ways, when something is infinite, you can't see it. But when you limit it, then it's Usefartem, then it would shine for us. Go ahead, Dr. Bob, please.
Rabbi, in the Bible, mostly counting is done via shekels, whether it be census or other things. Why are we suddenly counting Omer and grain and whatever?
So the simple answer would be that it's just an indicator of when to start counting. We don't count the Omer, we counting days. So you have other instances of counting days. For example, it's going to be the end of the book of Leviticus. We count 49 days, 7 days, we count 49, 7 weeks to the Shemitah, to the sabbatical year, and 7 times 7, 49 years to the Jubilee, to the Yovel. By the way, this is very, very much related because the pattern of 49 and then the 50th year, which we do every year, 49 days of Sephirah. On the 50th day, you have the holy day. That pattern follows with years, with the 49 years, and then the 50th year of Jubilee. So there is another example where you're counting time. When you're counting time, you don't count an object. But it does bring the Omer as the beginning of the sort of the marker of when you start counting. Now, why do you bring the Omer? Simply is because you're celebrating the harvest, and you bring the first harvest, the first grain to Hashem. And indeed, the mitzvah is you're not allowed to eat, even until today, according to most opinions outside of Israel, even outside of Israel, you're not allowed to eat of the new grain that grew, ripening now in April time. You can't eat it until the new grain, until the second day of Passover, until the day that they would bring the Omer offering. So that's the simple interpretation. And now why barley? Because the barley harvest is earlier than the wheat harvest. And therefore, the wheat, they actually brought the new wheat to the temple on Shavuot, but it doesn't matter. Once they offer the barley harvest, you could eat barley or wheat or any other grain after the second day of the holiday. So the simple interpretation is just an indicator that when to start counting. But as you know from studying Torah, that nothing is just simple. There's always a deeper interpretation. And a deeper interpretation, I don't know if he's going to say it here in this discourse, he may or may not. So I'm going to say it anyway, even though it may come up in this discourse. The simple interpretation is that there are 2 offerings in the Torah that are unique, that they're specifically supposed to be brought from barley, and that is the Omer and the Sotah. So the Sotah is the woman who secludes herself with a married woman, secludes herself with another man after she's been warned. Now, getting into that entire story, it's the second portion of Numbers. There, it also says that her offering is an offering of barley. Says the Talmud, why barley? Every other offering in the Torah is wheat. Wheat is supposed to be superior. In biblical times, wheat was the food for human beings, and barley was usually used for fodder for animals. So the Talmud there says, because this person, her actions were animalistic, so therefore her offering is also the food of the animal. That's why the Sotah is unique of all the offerings, all the grain offerings, that it's the only one that is Omer, that is barley. Okay, so that's what the Talmud says. So the Hasidic commentaries say, 1 second. The Sotah is not the only one who brings a barley offering. The other offering that's barley, and here the Talmud does not explain why that is the Omer. So the Omer that we bring, the Omer, the first grain, is also barley. Now the Talmud doesn't speak about it, maybe because the Talmud, from the simple interpretation, is just simple because that's the first grain that ripens, so that's what you bring. Okay, but the Hasidic interpretation is Hasidic interpretation is going to be if the whole point of counting is refining the animalistic side and refining the person. the animal soul, the animalistic side. So yes, following the interpretation of the Talmud, that the barley represents the animal soul. So now every person has to, so the counting is a process, it's not for the godly soul. The godly soul is fine. The process of refinement is the attributes of the animal soul. And that's why when the Torah tells you to start counting 7 weeks, it says from the day you bring the Omer. The Omer is the empowerment that the offering in the temple empowers us that we should be able to feed and refine the animal. So that's why, from the Hasidic perspective, that's why we count from the Torah. The Torah could have said from the second day of Passover, right? The Torah links the two. The Torah links the counting to the Omer. Seemingly, what's the connection? Sort of, it's two different themes. Yeah, I understand you want to bring the first grain, and I understand you want to count. But what are they connected? But from the Hasidic interpretation, it's connected because the process of refinement includes the refinement of the animal soul. Not includes, focuses on the refinement of the animal soul, and therefore the Omer is the food of the animal soul, like the Talmud says. So now all the pieces of the puzzle, I think, come together.
That last interpretation made the most sense.
Okay.
Because, yeah, thank you.
There you have it. Sometimes each interpretation is sort of a little one piece of the puzzle, but that final, the piece number 1000 makes everything else make sense. So that sort of completes the puzzle. Okay. Okay, so what did we say so far? Yeah, I think we're sharing. What did we say so far? We said that Usefartem, the counting also means Sephartem also has the meaning of illuminate, and that's why the Sfirot, the divine Sfirot, are called Sfirot because they bring forth the divine light to us. Had there been no Sfirot, there would be no light. Now, what do you mean there'll be no light? You have the infinite lights. Yeah, but the infinite light is too powerful for us to perceive. This is the mystical implication of the phrase, and you shall count for yourselves. Usefartem Lachem. This is beautiful. You shall make yourselves luminous so that you draw down the 10 sfirot so that they shine for you within the lowly realm. This is very interesting. We have a new interpretation here. This interpretation, Usefartem Lachem, count for yourself. What does it mean to count for yourself? Simple interpretation is count. The Hasidic interpretation is shine, meaning make yourself, make every aspect of your personality shine. It's beautiful. That would keep us busy for at least 49 days. But there's more. Usefartem Lachem here now says, Sfartem is from the word sphira. Bring the divine attributes to yourselves. What does that mean? Somehow or another, what it means is connect yourself, draw down the divine attributes to yourself. What does that mean? It means that if you refine your kindness, then your kindness will reflect the sphira of kindness. So in a way, if you refine yourself, you're drawing down the divine kindness to you, right? Imagine you have a mirror, and the mirror is sometimes can be very small, but the mirror could reflect something massive, right? There's a Kabbalistic interpretation which says like this, which says that a small mirror can reflect the entire sun. Right? The entire sun could be reflected through what? The entire sun. But the image of the entire sun could be reflected through a small mirror, provided that the mirror is clean. If the mirror is dirty, then it's not going to be able to reflect anything. So what we're saying is part of the process of refining the self is if I refine, for example, my chesed, my kindness, my love, then ultimately what that can happen, once it's refined, once my love has been purified, now I'm actually drawing down the source of my love. What's the source of my love? The divine attribute of love, connecting that to me. And now when I love, I'm reflecting the divine love. So this is super mystical, but it's beautiful interpretation with all the ideas of counting, of illuminating, meaning refining, and the divine sphira, they all come together. So let's read the indented line commentary. Rav Hillel of Parich. He's an interesting personality. We'll talk. He's an interesting character because he was not a rebbe. He was a chassid. He was a follower. He was a chassid, But he was one of the only Hasidim who, not the only ones, but he wrote Hasidic interpretations, and these interpretations were quoted by the Chabad Rebbe. So that's very unusual. But in any case, let's see what he says. Rav Hillel Parich, in his notes in Pelach HaRimon, saw this concept intimated by the wording of the prayer Ribono Shel Olam recited after the counting of the Omer, to purify us and sanctify us with your sublime holiness. That the holiness of the 10 Sefirot should rest within the powers of our soul and shine forth from us. So after the counting of the Omer, there's a prayer that we say, and we talk about how Hashem commanded us to count the Omer, and one of the things we say, that Hashem purify us and sanctify us with your sublime holiness. What does that mean? Purify us and sanctify us with the divine, with Hashem's holiness. So Rabbi Hillel Parich said, based on what the Alter Rebbe said, what we're saying is that we should be sanctified with Hashem's holiness. We should reflect this, the divine Sefirot. We should reflect the divine love. Okay, that's a high calling. So right now we just put it out there. Now we're going to go on a whole journey to figure out what the counting of the Omer is. Hopefully, when we come back, we'll know, we'll be a little smarter and a little bit more experienced in knowing how to make our Sefirot reflect the divine Sefirot. Okay, the journey begins. Ulahavi, to understand the above, it is necessary to explain the sequence of the divine service bringing on the holiday of Pesach and continuing until the holiday of Shavuot. In other words, we're saying Pesach and Shavuot is really one continuation. There's just a break to prepare from Pesach to Shavuot. By the way, where do you see this? So there's a very interesting interpretation that shows like this. You have the holiday of Pesach and you have the holiday of Sukkot. Both are 7 days. There's 7 days of Pesach, 7 days of Sukkot. Now they're parallels. They're 6 months apart, and they're sort of different. Each one is a different head of the year, right? Because Pesach is in the month of Rosh Hashanah, which is the beginning of the year. But I'm sorry, Sukkot is the month of Rosh Hashanah, which is in some ways the beginning of the year. But Pesach is the first month of the months. So we have 2 ways of counting. We discussed that in the past. The bottom line is that when you get so both Pesach and Sukkot, which are supposed to be mirror images of each other, both have 7 days. But there's a difference. What's the difference? There's an 8th day. Sukkot has its 8th day. Shmini Atzeret. The 8th day you stop. The thing is that in the 8th day of Shavuot, of Sukkot, is right after the 7 days. There are 7 days and there's an 8th day. Now the 8th day is a distinct day. How do I know? You make a Shechianu on the Kiddush and light candles at the 8th day. You don't make a Shechianu on the 7th day of Passover, or in the diaspora, the 8th day of Passover, because it's one continuation. But the 8th day of Sukkot is its own holiday. Now, Passover doesn't have an 8th day. Well, it's 7 days. In diaspora, it has 7 days, but in Israel, it has 7 days. So where did the 8th day of Passover go? So the commentaries say, of course, Passover has an 8th day. The 8th day is Shavuot. It's 7 weeks later, but then you have the 8th day. And that's why the Torah refers to the Shavuot with the same name that it refers to Shmini Atzeret. Well, the Torah doesn't refer to Shmini Atzeret. The Torah says, Bayom HaShmini Atzeret. On the 8th day will be Atzeret, will be a stop. That's a holiday, gathering. Atzeret has 2 meanings. It means stop, and it means to gather. So after you wait 6 weeks, after you celebrate 7 days of Sukkot, you stop and you have the 8th day. Pesach also has an 8th day, the holiday of Shavuot, which in the Torah is not called Shavuot, it's called Atzeret. The thing is, it's 7 weeks apart. So what does that show? That shows that Pesach and Shavuot are not 2 separate holidays. Maybe it's separate, but it's like Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. It's one continuum, but you need a preparation. And that preparation is the counting of the Omer. So we want to understand this process of moving from Passover to Shavuot through the counting of the Omer. Okay. Pesach commemorates the exodus from Egypt, Shavuot the giving of the Torah. Before receiving the Torah, it is necessary to count 7 full weeks, identifying all the qualities and sub-qualities within our emotional makeup with their parallels in the sublime Sefirot. Okay, we'll leave that apart. We'll leave the indentation for right now. Afterwards, after we count, the Jews were able to receive the Torah. Okay. So that's the pattern. The pattern is we leave Egypt, we count, and after we count, we get the Torah. So now Rabbi Shneur Zalman is going to explain what does this mean. This means this is the general concept of running and returning, which we spoke about many, many times. It's elaborated upon in the Hasidic teachings all over the Torah, but especially in the third book of Leviticus. It's actually related to this week's parsha, so we are learning something about this week's parsha, the death of the sons of Aaron, Acharei Mot, after the passing of the sons of Aaron. Again, they ran, they wanted to come close to Hashem, but they didn't return. They didn't realize that you have to come back into this physical world. So we're going to talk a little bit about Ratzov Hashov, running and returning, and we're going to explain that Pesach is running, and then the process of counting until Shavuot is returning. So let's read. We're going to read the commentary as well for this one because it looks interesting, and then we'll see how far we get. The phrases of this sequence, okay, where are we at? The phrases of this sequence reflects the Kabbalistic motifs of Ratzo and Shov, running and returning, as in the verse, the Hachayot. This is the verse from the book of Ezekiel, the chariot of Ezekiel, the vision of Ezekiel, Ezekiel chapter 1. There he says, V'hachayot, the animals, which means that it's a metaphor for the angels, that Ratzo v'Shov, they run and return. Literally, the verse is translated as the beasts ran to and fro. The beasts referred to are the angels, which are described as chayot, literally beasts, because their connection to God is bestial, meaning, i.e., impulsive and emotionally charged, rather than intellectual. See section 3, which explains this concept in greater depth. These angels are continually in flux between Ratzo, state of yearning for God, and the desire to be close to Him, and Shov, withdrawal out of fear and awe of Him. So that's the way that the angels. The angels, on one hand, they have a great yearning to come close to God. They run. But when you come too close to God, you come too close to God, you sense the awe of God, and then you retreat. That's the return. Our divine service mirrors this motif. There is an initial stage of yearning and desire to rise above the limitations of material existence and cling to God, and then a willingness to return to this plane and carry out His will, making this material realm a dwelling for Him. Okay. As the Maimar proceeds to explain, a similar sequence is reflected in the spiritual service of the holiday of Pesach and Shavuot. Pesach is the escape, is the running, is the breaking of boundaries. Then the counting and Shavuot is the opposite. It's actually coming down into boundaries. If you think about it, all of the Torah is all boundaries. It's all limitation. It's do this specific mitzvah in this specific time in this specific way. It's not an escape. It's not a retreat from the world, it's a sanctification of the world. But Passover is the opposite, is running. So let's see. For in the spiritual realms, everything follows the dynamic of Ratzo and Shov. We're going to go back to only reading the wide lines. Similarly, Pesach is identified with Ratzo, while Shavuot, we're running, while Shavuot is identified with Shov. For Pesach commemorates the exodus from Egypt that was characterized by haste. As it is written, you shall partake of it with haste. You have to eat the Pesach offering with haste. Even though, why do you have to run? You're not really leaving till the next afternoon, but they have to eat the Pesach offering in haste because it represents the spiritual state. When you're escaping, when you're running means fast. Running means you're not walking. Running means you're overwhelmed with this great yearning to move forward, that you can't walk because walk is too slow for you at that state. And it is written, with haste you departed Egypt. This came as the result of the revelation of godliness from above, as it is said, the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, was revealed to them and redeemed them. This led them to haste. What does that mean? Concerning the ultimate future, by contrast, the Mashiach comes, it is written, and you shall not depart with haste, nor will you proceed fleeting. For at that time, there will be no haste, as the time of the exodus from Egypt. By contrast, there was haste, i.e. a yearning to ascend from below upwards. Okay, so that's Passover. We're going to elaborate what that means. So Passover is they're running to escape. Shavuot, however, is characterized by the motif of Shov, of returning, and thus identified with the giving of the Torah, which is flowing downward. It's Hashem coming down onto Mount Sinai and sanctifying the physical world. The revelation of God's will on this lonely plain, as it is written, and God descended on Sinai, drawing down godliness from above. Okay. So that's the idea. That's Passover is running and Shavuot is returning. And now what we're going to say is every day we're supposed to remember the Exodus, meaning every day we too experience both the running and returning. And what he's going to say is when a person contemplates the transcendence of Hashem, how all the divine energy that creates the entire universe as we know is just a ray of Hashem. But it's only a ray, but Hashem himself is infinitely greater than that. So what do you want to do? You don't want to hang out in the ray. You want to escape. You want to get to the essence of God. And then you have the concept of return. Hashem wants you to be in this world. So basically, Pesach is running, Shavuot is returning. Every day we remember the Exodus, meaning every day we also have to run and return. And here we have, and then he's going to offer the meditation, which makes the person want to escape, and then the return that follows that. So that's the outline of this, the end of this chapter in the discourse. I'm going to try to read it quickly so we read a full chapter today. So here we go.
Rabbi, just so we are clear,
Yeah.
the mitzvah is to remember the Exodus every day. It's not, nobody mentioned Shavuot, which in essence is the return, which in many ways is more important. I mean, counting slows the tempo down and is advantageous. If you get mad, you count to 10.
Right.
Nobody's saying just remember the flying off the handle when Menachem went nuts someday.
Right. Yeah, and then what happens often? So nobody has to remember. What I would say is, let's see what he addresses that. I don't know. I didn't read it so carefully this year. So let's see if he addresses that. But even if he doesn't address it, I would say that he already preceded this by saying that Shavuot is a continuation of Passover. So it's technically 7 weeks apart, but it's day 8 of Passover. By the way, day 8 means it follows the 7. So in other words, if he's going to interpret the verse that you have to remember the Exodus, meaning experience the Exodus every day, you have to experience Pesach. Part of Pesach is Shavuot. There's no running without returning. It's the pulse of life, right? If you're looking at the heart and you say, my heart is very healthy. It's just a half a pulse. It just opens, but it doesn't retreat, right? No, then you're dead, right? So the point here is that we can't really separate the running and returning. I mean, you could, that's a sin. But conceptually, when you say Pesach, I think he tried to establish, even though he did it very briefly. So maybe he'll elaborate upon it later. I don't know. But it seems to me that that's what we established, that Shavuot comes along. It's a package. If you say you have to remember the Exodus, it means the Exodus and the day 8 of the Exodus, because day 8 is a continuation to day 7. Otherwise,
and metaphorically, nobody says lub; they say lub dub.
Right.
For a heartbeat.
Right. And by the way, if you think about the Shema, it's very interesting. The Shema, if you want to talk about the orientation of the Shema, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. What does Rabbi Akiva say? Well, even if Rabbi Akiva says that's all about Hashem Echad, but even before, generally speaking, love means you're willing to give up everything for God. You're willing to give up your entire life for Hashem. That's an orientation of escape. What happens after that? Say the Shema when you sit in your home, when you're on the road, on your doorposts, on your gates. It brings you down to daily life. So you start with the Ratzah, you start with I'm willing to give up my life to God, and you end with make sure to remember God when you're going out of your house to the rest of the world, right? So the orientation is both the running up, but also coming back down and then flowing outward. So even in the paragraph of Shema, you have both the pulse of running and the pulse of returning.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. The Alter Rebbe, okay, behold, it is written so that you remember the day of your exodus from Egypt, all the days of your life. And our sages said, in every generation, a person is obligated to see himself as if he departed from Egypt. Every day there must be an exodus from Egypt in our individual divine service. This is reflected in the recitation of the Shema, where we declare, and you shall love God, and conclude in the end of the 3rd paragraph of the Shema, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. In particular, the recitation of the prayers from Baruch Sha'amar until the Shema are preparatory stages, enabling a person to achieve a personal exodus and an expression of love. We're not going to get into that right now. This comes as a result of a person's contemplation of how the entire hosts of heaven bow down to you. That's a verse that we say in the Psukei de Zimra, songs of praise in the beginning of davening. And the Ofanim and the holy Chayot with a mighty sound rise. How the Chayot break out in sweat from their service of his throne. They carry and are lifted up with his throne. Thousands upon thousands and myriads upon myriads were serving him. And all of these lofty celestial beings are in a continuous state of bittul. So we're not going to get into commentaries that generally speaking, what we're saying is that all the spiritual realms are completely nullified and yearning to Hashem. On this basis, we can understand the intent of the verse to make known his mighty acts to man and the glory of the magnificence of his kingdom. We say this in Ashrei. The magnificence of his kingdom is that all the created beings, including those of the spiritual realms, are nullified unto him. The inspiration for their self-nullification is evoked by the theory, by their realization that your kingship is a kingship over all the world. So this is also a verse from Ashrei. We're going to elaborate. Malchutcha, your kingship is the kingship of all the worlds. The simple interpretation means God is the king over all the worlds. The Kabbalistic interpretation is all the worlds derive only from Malchut, only from the lowest sphera, only from a ray of Hashem. Malchut is speech. So it's like all the worlds come from one utterance of Hashem. And Hashem himself obviously is much greater than that. So that's the meditation. To explain what is meant by your kingship, Malchutcha, your kingship. We're going to say it means it's your attribute of Malchut. The vitality of all the world stems solely from God's attribute of kingship, which is merely a ray of his name. It is not like the manner in which the soul endows the body with vitality, in which instance the essence of the vitality of the soul is actually enclosed in the body. Instead, when God grants vitality to the spiritual cosmos, his essence and his beings remain lofty and exalted, meaning Hashem himself is not invested in the world. It's only his speech. It's only a ray of Hashem, because Hashem himself is infinite. There is nothing that can enclose him at all. He exists in the past, present, and future without any change at all, as it is written, I, God, have not changed. And we say in our prayers, you existed before the world was created, you exist after the world was created, without any change at all. There is nothing that brings about concealment and hiddenness before him. It is only a ray of his name, a ray of his glorious kingdom that endows all the worlds with life and existence. This is the meaning of the verse, the intent of the verse. Your kingship is a kingship over all worlds. There are thousands upon thousands and myriads upon myriads of worlds. As is written, is there a number to his legions? And even the physical world is vast. As our sages say, it is a 500-year journey from earth to heavens. Nevertheless, the entire framework of existence is of no consequence with regard to his light, which is actually infinite. For as it is well known, even the number one has some value when compared to a myriad of myriads, for it is a small portion of a larger sum. Even a myriad of myriads, by contrast, cannot be compared to an entity that is unlimited and fully infinite. Since the spiritual beings comprehend all of this, they are always in a state of bittul. What he's saying here is like this: 1 to a billion has a ratio, has a connection, because a billion is limited. It's a very large number, but it's still a limitation. So a billion is just a billion ones. But then a billion toward infinity is no relation at all, because infinity is a completely different type of concept. And that's what we're saying. All the angels understand and comprehend that all the existence of the worlds, kol olamim, all the worlds only come from Malchut, only come from a ray of Hashem, but Hashem himself is far beyond anything that the creation could understand. Just going to take a little break and plug into the source. There we go. Okay, fine. As a result of the contemplation of all this, while deepening one's knowledge, as a direct consequence, one will come to a state of ratzo when reciting the Shema, causing him to love the Lord your God with all your heart, i.e. to seek to transcend all boundaries and limitations as they involve constraints, for example, the 500-year journey mentioned above. Whether these constraints be material or spiritual, they are boundaries and limitations that cover and conceal God's truth and cause existence to appear as a significant and an independent entity, a yesh. Instead, the soul's desire will be only to cling to him, and he is unlimited, truly infinite. Transcending these boundaries and limitations is one's personal exodus from Egypt. This is beautiful. Why? Thus, in the Egyptian exile, it was said by Pharaoh, I do not know God, using the name Havaya. The aspect of godliness, which is past, present, and future as one, was unknown to him. He was only aware of the aspect of godliness identified with the name Elohim, which involves the covering and concealment of God's creative life energy. Meaning Elohim is God the way he's invested in nature. Hashem is Hashem the way he transcends nature, past, present, and future as one. Pharaoh says, I don't know Hashem. I cannot understand the transcendence of God, because Egypt is the limitation. But the exodus of Egypt means leaving not just the geography of Egypt, but leaving the state of limitation and understanding that Hashem transcends all of this. And if the soul understands that Hashem transcends all of this and everything in this world is just a ray compared to the infinite light of Hashem, then what you want is the infinity. That's the cause of the running. This is the implication of Pharaoh's statement, I do not know Havaya, that during the Egyptian exile, the knowledge of Havaya was in exile. So spiritual exile means, yes, I sense God's presence in the world, but I don't sense God's infinity. I don't sense God's transcendence. I don't run. This is why the recitation of the Shema concludes with the statement, I am Hashem, who took you out of Egypt, placing the emphasis on the name Hashem. Absolutely beautiful. Hashem takes you out of Egypt. Why? Because Elohim is Egypt. The understanding that God is within nature, even Pharaoh can get that. Even Pharaoh can understand that. To break free of Egypt, you need Hashem, where God is past, present, and future. So to summarize, we'll read the summary inside. Well, it's a long summary, forget it. To summarize, what are we saying? We started saying the concept of counting. Usefartem Lachem. And somehow or another, counting also implies that we are going to reflect the divine spheros. To explain this concept of counting, we say we first have to introduce the idea of the theme of the holiday of Pesach, and then Shavuot. So what did we say? We said Pesach is running, Shavuot is returning. Pesach is to escape limitation, Shavuot is to bring God down into the physical world. And then we start explaining that was the idea, that's what the angels understand. Then we say that we have to leave Egypt, we have to go through this process of the Exodus every day. And that is why the prayer is built to lead up to the Shema, and the Shema is loving you, Lord your God, with all your heart, which is an act of transcendence, escape. And the way we get to that transcendence is thinking about verses such as the verse, Malchutcha Malchut Kol Alamim, your kingship is the kingship of all the worlds, meaning all the worlds are but one ray of Hashem. Could you imagine if the entire universe, which we can't even grasp, the vastness of the universe, the sages say it's 500 years to heaven and 500 years between each heaven. That was the boundaries of their speech. They couldn't convey the vastness of the universe the way we understand it today. But today we understand the vastness of the universe incomprehensible. Trillions of stars. Now, all of this is just one way of Hashem, because compared to one way of the sun. What is Hashem? Hashem is totally beyond that limitation. If a person really understands that, they don't want the limitation, they want the infinity. That's the Exodus, that's Hashem, and that's why Hashem takes you out of Egypt. As opposed to Elohim. Elohim, even Pharaoh knows Elohim. Now that we discussed the running, next week, hopefully, or the week after, we'll think about the return. So that's the story in short. The first chapter of the discourse, I believe the discourse has 3 sections, so it'll keep us busy till portion of Omer. 2 more weeks is the portion of Omer, which would also be not only the counting of the Omer, but it's also going to be that weekly parsha, so everything fits by divine providence. Go ahead, Vicky, please.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm looking forward to next few weeks. I have a question for you. First of all, thank you, Bob, for the question, the why question, why we're counting. And I was thinking there is a connection between the plagues and the Sefirot. So the Egyptian kind of perverted all the Sefirot, and that's why the plague happened.
Right.
Is that maybe the reason? Could that be the reason that we kind of trying to correct that and refine? My other question is this in this discourse, discussed in this discourse, or in a different place?
So I have not seen in Chabad Chassidut so much about the 10 plagues, but it's all over the other writings of Chassidut. Sfat Emet talks about it all the time. He talks about how that there are 10 utterances. Hashem creates the world with 10 utterances, and then there's the 10 plagues, and then there's the 10 commandments. So his model is that Egypt conceals the 10 utterances. In other words, in Egypt, you don't see that Hashem spoke of 10 utterances. And therefore, you need the 10 plagues to break the concealment. And once you have the 10 plagues breaking the concealment, then you reveal the 10 utterances. And when you do that, then you can get the Torah. So he writes a lot about that. Sfat Emet, which is the founding book of sort of the Chassidus of Ger and other Chassidusin. But the point here is, I have not seen, I'm sure it's out there, a detailed connection between each plague and the 10 Sefirot, but yeah, these are all interrelated. I don't think Rabbi Shneur Zalman is going to talk about it in this discourse, but these are concepts that are discussed, absolutely.
It's also fascinating,
Okay.
this whole idea of gematria, numbers, 49 being a multiple of 7. This Jubilee is 49. I mean, it's amazing that the Bible is so taken up with numbers.
Right. Yeah. If you look at the Kabbalah is fascinated with numbers. And like I said, the earliest form of the Sphira, it could be, people think that the first time it's written, it actually means numbers. And then it gets a deeper meaning. In other words, numbers is, numbers is a way of creating systems, and sort of in some ways that's the building blocks of creation. So that's going to be reflected in the Kabbalah, in the Torah, and in the Kabbalah, and in the Gematria, because every letter is really a number, and then you create combinations, and that's how you create the well, on one hand, the multiplicity, but on the other hand, you can also create the connection between all creation, because all creation boils back to 22 letters. So that's in some ways unifying, right? You're talking about billions and trillions of creations, but ultimately it all comes from the 22 letters, which ultimately are 22 letters of the Torah. So the letters have a way of, on one hand, creating diversity and separation and multiplicity, but on the other hand, language, numbers create order, and the order creates the connection. So that's why the concept of numbers is so interesting, because it creates, like I said, it does the diversity, but it also does the unification that follows.
It's wonderful how Judaism always has it both ways.
Yes. As you always remind us, Tom. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Chazak
Shabbat
Baruch.
shalom.
Have a
Be well.
wonderful Shabbos, Vicky.
Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.